Hi, Pierre.
Okay, so there will be a cut. I want to start the recording from now, and not to forget it, but there will be a cut. We will use the recording just from the beginning of the panel.
So we can say really inappropriate things now.
No, it cannot.
It's not recorded, but there is still a public. So, and there is Magda. No.
You know, whenever we record is there forever. It's very dangerous. Social media, be careful.
Yeah. Everything is public, recorded or not. So what I propose to you is to start at 52 array, and
yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
And I record, and we are looking with the colleagues of ESSEC also for a way to live stream, because I can share the link of this session and to use my account to live stream it on ESSEC. So at 52, I propose you to start.
Okay, I'll do that. But I don't know if we'll grow to be much bigger a crowd. So I think we'll be having quite a kind of small, intimate conversation. So
as you want. I have just shared the rights to animate the session, so you can also share whatever you want here.
I want it directly out on the air, everything.
Okay.
I was going to do all kinds of brave things with technology, but after François' stressful experience, I don't feel like doing anything.
But you have a very nice background, Ray. Or
Yeah,
a backdrop, whatever you call it, behind you. There are lots of clocks.
Yeah, it's from Christian Marclay's piece, his installation called The Clock, which is I don't know if you've seen it, it's an amazing piece. So it's a 24-hour art installation, and he painstakingly has cut from movies people looking at watches and clocks, so that, you know, at all the time he's made a new timepiece using all these splices from films. And what I love about it is that he kind of imposes art galleries to stay open like 24 hours to show his piece. And like some people have done the marathon of staying in the gallery and watching every scene. So it's I thought it was a useful kind of thing. So it's
yes, it's fantastic. Beautiful. I'm trying to mail to Elen Rio. She was asking, but she didn't.
So
yes.
Ray, if you want to start now, everything is fine. We record and we live stream. So if you want to start, the floor is yours.
Great. So thank you to everybody and welcome to panel 3, exploring temporalities in management organization studies, the potentialities of art, writing, and ethnographic experimentation. So we're a small group, and so that allows a really intimate conversation. And we have, oh, is there somebody there in the background? No. So we have, and excuse my ignorant Irish accent as I try to pronounce these wonderful names, but Jenny Helin, Pierre, Guillet de Monthoux, and Elen Rio. Hopefully Elen will be joining us if she can make her way digitally to this space. So I might start by saying hello to our panelists who are with us, Pierre and Jenny, if you'd like to say hello and maybe introduce yourself a little bit. And if we start with Pierre and then maybe move to Jenny, if that's okay. You're there on mute, Pierre.
Oh, perfect. Somebody muted me. Maybe you did. I don't know. Anyway, so hi, I'm Pierre, and I'm speaking to you from very hot Stockholm, and I have been. I'm working for the moment on trying to trace back the thinking and applications, inspirations from one specific French philosopher that has come to be partner in crime with me, Jenny, and a third researcher called Matilda, who unfortunately can't be with us now. But we're doing field work and guided by this philosopher Gaston Bachelard. And the question is, how do you approach the field, which is of agricultural entrepreneurs? Seems strange, but it's not that strange, because Bachelard was fascinated by earth, by land, earth, and landscape, and so on. So how do you combine this? And Bachelard is also known for a philosophical reflection on time. This is, however, not my specialty, but rather Jenny Helin's specialty is working on that. Yeah, so that's enough as an introduction, and I'm affiliated with Stockholm School of Economics, with Uppsala University, and a little here and there, sort of a philosopher professor at large, whatever that means, everywhere and nowhere. Zombie professor. Okay, thank you.
A great segue into introducing Jenny. You want to say hello?
Yes, hello, my name is Jenny. I'm also speaking from a very warm summer day in Sweden too, but I live on Gotland, an island east of mainland Sweden, so that's where I am. Happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, welcome. And Elen managed to find us here, which is brilliant. So you're only a second or two later, nothing really happened in your absence, so welcome. Do you want to maybe just introduce yourself and say hello?
Hello everyone, I'm Elen Riot. I work in the Reims University and I'm interested. I worked also with Pierre and Jenny. I visited their place in Sweden, in both Stockholm and Gotland, where I was really happy to be. And I study arts in different circumstances. Some of them are social movements, and others are just the work of creators of different origins. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, great. So the first question, and we were given a series of questions to think with, but they're really just jumping off points for our conversation. But the first question is, what sent around was, what is at stake effectively and emotionally and sensibly in organizational temporalities, which is, I think, probably a complicated way of saying, why does this matter to us and what we're doing here today? So I don't know who'd like to go first, but Pierre is unmuted, so we might take advantage of that. And okay. You maybe want to address that. Thanks.
Yeah, well, I mean, these questions overlap each other a little bit, of course, but what is the organizational, what we've been sort of discussing a lot in our project, where we are looking at this Bachelard, a guy who's sort of been fascinated by how you get in touch with materiality, how imagination is a way to understand the environment where you are, you can say, and how poetics helps you to get into a consciousness about the environment. Actually, an interesting thing in his writing is that he is rather critical to organizing and organizations. I mean, being a philosopher from beginning of the 20th century, he uses the word of organization, but organization comes into his thinking as a way to conduct scientific research. The interesting thing with this guy is that he's doing hello, is is doing a philosophy which is a mix of philosophy of science and philosophy of thinking, or kind of primitive thinking, you could say. So the whole atmosphere in which at least I and we work when we start have him as a starting point is to be rather critical to this kind of organization. For Bachelard and for I would say most philosophers, the point of imagination and creation and so on is usually an individual point of view if they are not structuralists. And what sort of obstructs or stops the possibility of this almost, and he uses the word actually, solitary exercise which he is engaged in, and which he think that both scientists and human beings are engaged in. What obstructs that is the problem. What he accepts, what is accepted from them, and when I'm talking about Bachelard, of course, you could think of someone who's working in a vaguely Kantian kind of philosophy, inspired by phenomenology, partly, vaguely too, because he's not a serious kind of German phenomenologist. So organization becomes a problematic, and it turns out that what it turns around is really how to see the limitation of organization, and not sort of jump into a kind of constructivist approach by which you would say that organizing is the most important thing, and time is of course part of that. But I think that Jenny has been working on the temporality especially, and maybe you want to say a few words there too on how this guy actually explicitly confronts ideas about time.
Yes, I can do that. And I think, I mean, your question, Ray, a bit, but also why does this matter right now? I think, I mean, that can of course be answered in many ways, but to me at least, and I think to many others, it's rather obvious that the way that we organize for the time being, it just doesn't work. We kind of had enough this kind of machinery way of thinking that we have been criticizing for so many years, but still, what options have we kind of offered, really? And I mean, with this COVID situation where we eventually had to kind of make some kind of break and see, as a Swede also, to see, I mean, we always thought we were doing good when it comes to organizing and so, but we can obviously see we did not. So, I mean, this has been very telling about the kind of also the vulnerability of how we are of organizing things generally now, and the responsibility from us as being organization and management scholars to come up with something else. And I think that's where we are. What else? This doesn't work. How can we more kind of radically think differently in terms of how to organize? And like Pierre said, who then can we think with? Who can we read? What kind of questions do we need to engage with? And I think you are pointing to, as Pierre, the kind of interest I have in his notion of vertical time that I know also Francois work with, for instance. And you presented here as well the idea of time and the depth of time, and that there are possibilities to maybe think of how we can make a rupture if we think of time in another way. And then this Bachelard, this particular philosopher, he talks about time as vertical rather than the horizontal kind of clock time. And then that can enable other ways of relating to time and thinking to time. And so that could be one way to go about. But I think that the importance is to say that, hey, we had enough kind of. So let me stop there for now.
Sorry.
No, Pierre?
No, I'm just sort of thinking of, I mean, what he did, formally, sort of superficially said. I mean, he engaged in a criticism of something that was very important at that time in France, and that was the Bergsonian time. And if I recall correctly, there was like 10 years ago, I think Steve Linstead, in the context of organizational theory and so on, 15 years even, engaged in reading, inspired us all to read Bergson. Then we see when we approached this other guy who Bergson was at Collège de France, and Bachelard was at Sorbonne, and that is partly an explanation of the confrontations between the two schools of looking at time, that he was aiming at a very important and dominant view of time, which was the Bergsonian. And I think the Bergsonian also has been very influential when it comes to process thinking in organizational theory, where Jenny has been the editor of the big handbook that came out, a big collection of essays on process philosophy 5 years ago, almost now. So situating in the history of ideas, this is also, I mean, the schools about looking upon time that are confronting each other. But I think when you say today, yes, of course, what is fascinating by this thinking and this specific attack on Bergson is that it comes from someone who wants to understand how science goes on. I mean, and I speak of natural science. He was interested in chemistry, was interested in biology, was interested in physics, and so on. So it's not some kind of escapism from.
Pierre, is it possible to disrupt a little bit the panel and to stop about a little bit on what you said about Bachelard? Should we take him seriously, or should we take him poetically? I mean, either we say that Bachelard is against Bergson. Bergson stresses the importance of duration, and Bachelard stresses the importance of instant, and says that from something close to quantum physics, life is made of instants, discontinuities, and we can stop there. And as he says himself, the two postures are absolutely incompatible. Or maybe we say that Bachelard is offering a poetical, maybe ethical invitation that we also find in his book, The Poesy of Space. And he says we need to inhabit life. And maybe what he offers, it's kind of a cut. I'm not saying that he's normative. I keep stressing that he's poetic in a way. And as many other people, he says that the only way to live in the world and to inhabit the world, it's poetically. So I would be curious to have your opinion and Jenny's opinion and Elen's opinion on this issue of Bachelard and discontinuities. Because Bachelard is fascinating. As you said, he's not that well known in management and org studies. He's saying beautiful things, important for our debate about temporality. But how seriously should we treat Bachelard? How poetically should we make him come into the conversation? Sorry for the disruption.
No, it's good. It's really good.
Yeah. What do you think, Elen?
So it's really difficult for me. Actually, I didn't work on the Bachelard project, so I love, as much as I like Bachelard, and I read Suzanne Bachelard, his daughter's work on Husserl, which is brilliant. I prefer to let you discuss this point, as I'm very, very ignorant compared to you.
No, and I guess this session shouldn't be about Bachelard per se, but what I think is interesting, what he can contribute and help us with, is exactly what you wrote in the chat and what Francois said, this kind of poetic view and emphasizing what's needed in order for us to kind of open up for poetics in the way we organize, if that's possible at all, which one could ask, of course. But I think for sure the way we do now and the way we kind of plan and manage does not. So we are, like you say, Francois, we need a rupture, and we have kind of encountered a rupture, I think. And maybe this can kind of provide an opening for something else that could be potentially more poetic, for instance, if we would be open to it.
I think also that so what do we mean by poetic? And if you take the kind of Anglo-Saxon approach to Bachelard, there is also the easy way out, that he was a split guy. He was schizotype of philosopher, focusing in the morning on scientific research, in the afternoon on poetics, and it's a puzzle to many to see how these two can you at all create a bridge between? Does the one matter for the other? But I would say that the poet, what he stresses, in a sense, to me, and not only to me, but to the philosophers who read him, is the poetics as a part of a rational project, as a reason, not a rational, but a project of reason. So poetics is not an escape from some sort of hope for reason. I'm saying reason, I'm not saying rationality, because again, I mean, this is, to connect to Francois Xavier's very interesting question, of course, is to say that what he opens to up is how can poetics help us go about things in life that are connected to reasonable research and quest for the unknown, which you do in science and so on, and also into everyday life. So it's not a split. The two things go together in him, and that's.
But also, I think, I mean, what's wonderful about the poetic is, like we know, is the possibility for opening up for ambiguity, for vulnerability, for, like you say, the unknown, other kind of characters that we haven't really worked with in terms of thinking of organization. So if we could kind of embody that more, and then maybe we could think differently also about how we organize and the reason for doing that and so on. And I think that's very much, given where we are today and all the challenges that we are facing, that's, I think, could be potential avenues that would be very important.
Just to intervene as chair and grab control back a little bit. A way of thinking through that is to think with the term rationalities rather than rationality. The multiple kind of world images, modes of thinking, temporal modes, rather than a temporal mode beyond the mechanical. But I'm conscious that Elen hasn't rolled out her response to question 1 yet, and to address the question of what is, to circle back to our kind of core theme, what's at stake here in organizational temporalities.
I thank you. I thank you, Ray. I try not to be too long because we want to hear all the other questions, but I try to reflect on the whole topic that was suggested to us, including ethnography and poetry. And I think this is precisely the reason why a long time ago now I stopped studying philosophy and its theory to go into ethnography and then to organization studies, because I think that's exactly what you find in Bachelard's work that's so specific, because he used to be a mailman and he is from the countryside, so he likes the everyday forms of dealing with time, like small objects or little songs or very material things, or being outside in the countryside and appreciating just trees and flowers. And I think with ethnography and poetry is a way for us scientists, in a sense, to go back to things that are shared with everyone, not just scientists, but forms that we deal with everyday life. And that's why I find it interesting, this notion of time. You always have to, in my view, to be interesting to deal with it, you have to go back to some forms of, to simple forms like folklore. And I think ethnography and poetry in two different ways are very, very good at getting these dimensions, sharing these charms of everyday life.
Yeah, and in a minute we're going to be talking about, or the later questions will ask how we don't compartmentalize poetics and artistic practices to this part of our life to allow the machine to run. But before then, we've to address the question of what is the role and what is the space and place of art and art-based approaches to how we can understand experience, relay our experience of time. So I might, oh yeah, if anybody wants to.
I can rebound directly on this one. I try to leave space to everyone. I think we all, of course, react to this question of art in different ways, and I think it's very much influenced to what we are, or fields, or current studies, of course. So I just take the liberty to mention two things I'm studying now that are ways that I find arts helping us to understand time. One of my topic is sustainability. We working a lot on rural studies and the agriculture, sometimes organic and sometimes very industrial. In all region, it's very important, east of France. And I thought one way that really helped me deal with this issue of nature, and in the next questions, I say other topics that are really well dealt with artists, but on this subject of nature, what I really find inspiration in is the photographic work of Jan Mangard, who is from Switzerland, and he did this book 5 years ago called Deposit. I met him on the occasion when he presented the book, and it's documented images, a compendium of all the ways our secular society actually manages its heritage of live forms. So he took pictures of all over the world, human DNA in the forms of slivers of umbilical cord, dental samples and sperm. He went to look for the DNA of animals already extinct, the seeds of all manners of agricultural plants. And from 2009 and 2013, he went to find these specimens in labs, zoos, and botanical seed banks. And that's a way to think of how our secular society thinks of life today through science, but it's really material what we can see of that. And it's a sort of distant approach that could be a form of contemporary encyclopedia of the sort of things that the people I interview, I work with in everyday life, in agriculture, deal with as if it were obvious forms that didn't come from like the oldest time or very recent time, forms of life and also forms of time. So I think this is a very inspiring artistic work.
If you can you put the name
yes, of course.
of the photographer in the chat?
Yeah, with
maybe
pleasure.
if we go back to Jenny and then to Pierre on this question.
Yes, I think one way that we are exploring how to work with artists for the time being is very much in our teaching. So, and I find it very helpful. I mean, if I want to like I said, want us to try to reach out to something else. And it's very difficult when we are, I myself is very ingrained in this way of thinking that I've been, taught and then have to teach to my students. So then to bring in artists, they can kind of help us very much to break with what we take for granted, both in what they point at, how they do it, and very much in terms of how they work. So I'm very inspired also in the work process and what we can learn from that. So that's, I would say, is the area where I think is very interesting and to try to work with artists, and we do that. And we have been lately working much with feminist artists. I think they have these kinds of vulnerabilities and so on that I spoke about can help us to come with that. And I've also been very appreciated by students.
So, for instance, when we have been thinking about how to approach the agricultural work and agricultural world and so on, we have teamed up with a documentary filmmaker called Jenny Holt, who has produced several films from a rural milieu, and by sort of just having seminars together and projecting her work, we have engaged. There has been a discussion about, we've started a discussion about what then does it mean to do perhaps what Elen was referring to go to the microscope, to take the small details and start to do something, maybe ethnographically. You could call her work, Jenny Holt's work, ethnographical if you want, I imagine, to do something there. And how does the poetic differ from the narrative? Especially in times where temporality in organizations has been so marked for years and years and years, of this discovery that storytelling is how we organize, and the narrativity, the literature shows us this and shows us that, and with that comes a whole set package of ideas about temporal, how to do a plot and how to develop a récit and things like that. And Jenny, for instance, Jenny Holt has helped Jenny and Pierre and Matilda to break this up. And so she goes out on a farm, and out comes a movie which is beautiful and which sort of focuses on the bird songs and the sound of the chainsaw when the trees are cut and so taking art in the classroom, in the seminar room, when you talk about this.
What strikes me is when you describe this practice, it's a practice of going back. We've talked about primitive societies, we've talked about kind of like folk, we've talked about a kind of this romantic, poetic approaches that are very different from how most of us conduct ourselves in our everyday work, which kind of segues to the next question, which is, how could we, or how should we, in how we organize conferences, workshops, but how we teach, how we research, how we write, and how we be as academics respond to what you're identifying here? Okay, sorry, that was an awful question.
No, it's a very good question, but we're waiting for someone else to start. Okay, I'll start. But I think, to give an example of ways of there are millions of ways of doing this, but having an atmosphere in a classroom, having an atmosphere in the work environment where we work and so on, where it becomes essential to focus on an object, a text, or something like that, and try to spend time together during the the time we meet and discuss things around precisely one object. And how could you describe what I'm trying to say now? Nobody understands that. Well, I mean, someone who's trying to do this has been working in a philosophical tradition too, is Graham Harman in his speculative realism, saying that when we focus on something, which could be art, I mean, or maybe just focusing on something turns it to something which has a sort of a quality of art, is to drop, is try to approach the thing, not in itself, but the thing. How could you do that? When we read, for instance, Bachelard together, we sit down and we focus on the text, and very short, small text, and it's not a traditional seminar where you get a reading list of 15 articles that nobody reads and everyone claims to understand, and a little short on, and also reading in a loud voice. Very simple things. I mean, it's that gives a kind of atmosphere. We felt that makes us approach the text in question, or the object in question, or the art piece in question, or the sample of something out there in question in another way. Slowing down, I mean, it has to do with time. Slowing down, focusing on something, and trying to get away from the stress of leaving out so much. And well, it's yeah. Well, Ray, you're right in a sense. It's very, and Ellen too. It's very simple, the simple things, and primitive, romantic. No, I don't think so. But
I have a different take on that, if you may, Pierre, because I thought of that. What happens in our, I would say, everyday life, like encountering students and doctoral students now, in my case, and I like that idea that working on social movements, many of them have this. We have this spontaneity of having topics that we were engaged in, that we share, and in class, when we all discuss, and in conferences, I think being an activist is sometimes a great way to share what Goffman called like the bizarre potentials of interactional dynamics. It's like it gives us very sort of interesting things to talk about that go beyond our knowledge in organization. For instance, I have two examples. I talked to different students. It just so happens that my university, we have students from all over the world. Some of them from Algeria, West Africa, and some of them I discussed with Lebanese students. And in many cases, they were part of revolutions. And one thing that just struck me as fascinating, and looking at the language we all use in a different way, scientific, like social scientists use specific words so as to shield them from any possibly attacks, and activists and people who are engaged in revolution as well. So for instance, this Algerian student, he wrote an essay for his master about La Casa del Mouradia. It's a song by football supporters, but in fact, it's protesting against the Algerian regime. I wish I could let you hear the song now. It's quite catching, actually. And actually, they're using an old folkloric language. It's inspired by poetry, shabi, and rap, and also inspired by Victor Hugo, his poetry against Napoleon III when he protested that. And it's also inspired, it's strange, but he explains that it's inspired from a sort of how they call that, like movies, like series series on Netflix called La Casa de Papel. Sorry, I'm not a movie like this kind of series. I'm not at all well known. I tend to prefer books most of the time, but this is sort of their inspiration. And we were discussing just the words of how this song spread to all over the Algerian population. And it's very funny and very catchy at the same time. And it's a way to tell the story of everyday life and time. So if you're okay, I try to translate it into English. It discusses the sort of political situation in Algeria and how the people can communicate through that song because they are not able, of course, to do it in a more direct way. So they imagine going to a football stadium and singing that song in that language that's not Arabic, that everybody sort of understands, but it's like hidden meaning to be able to express your anger, your desire to change things. So here the song goes. The first mandate, let's say it's over. They got us with the Black Decade. The second mandate, the story gets clearer. La Casa del Mouradia, meaning it's a sort of a hold up to break the bank. The third mandate, the country got thinner due to personal interest. The fourth mandate, the doll is dead and the story goes on. And the fifth mandate will follow. The sun is getting down. So that's the kind of conversation you get in through social sciences with your students from all over the world. And so I may be critical of some conferences and for all sorts of reasons, but I was thinking and comparing with the Lebanese, for instance, I was sort of fascinated that we could have the freedom still to be able to discuss such live contemporary movements with people who are part of them and who understand what it means. So I put the link to the song so you can hear it now.
Thanks. And that's like, it's such a kind of hopeful vision of what the university can be. And I'm noticing Ian's comment in the chat, which suggests that that's not a universal sensation. So I know we're at the wall of when we're supposed to be talking to, and we're talking about time and we should be definitely taking our breaks. So I'm just going to ask for a final comment and maybe something hopeful and optimistic from people about how they may see time being different. So that's another awkward question, as I can not see anybody grab at the microphone. So Jenny, could I?
Yeah, I'm very optimistic about the fact that we have been going through digital meeting and conferences and things, education for 1.5 years. And I think we open up for exploring non-digital encounters and what that can actually do to us. I don't know if I'm only talking for myself, but I can really feel now, having tried this. I mean, it's wonderful that we can meet this way today, but I think these kinds of really, I mean, bringing in also the activists, the kind of engagement and really make something out of that power. I think we need to meet each other in another way. And I'm very optimistic that we will now, do that. I would do that at least in my,
and we will appreciate it in another way too.
And we will, I think.
As Ellen was saying, we're happy not to be in Syria or whatever. I mean, maybe we meet each other, and it's also a fantastic feeling to go out on the streets and meet people.
Yeah, and I think
can you imagine that we would live again and sort of resuscitate in this kind of so things are going to be, can't be worse, will be better.
It's an occasion to thank Francois for organizing such wonderful conferences that have been going on the whole year through, and it was reasons for us to hope to. I don't detest so much Zoom meetings. Many of them were really wearisome, but these conferences are really opening our mind. It's a way to meet people from all over the world. So it's really a chance, and I wouldn't be so hard on digital versions. Although I find, of course, we will be happy to go walk everywhere in the street and meet again, of course, but now we can do it with maybe people we didn't know before. And that's the way we kept things going, and that's really important. Thank you, Francois, and thank you all.
So thanks to our panelists and Pierre, Jenny, and Elen. And I gather we're meeting in 10 minutes in another escape.
Another song is coming.
Hear the music.
Good.
Yeah. Okay, so with that, we'll sign off. And
thanks,
okay,
Ray. Thanks, Ray, for taking care of
it. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Okay. Bye.